Good morning. I have about a half a voice, so we'll do the best we can. So it's good to see everybody. Shabbat Shalom. You are hereby designated the hardcore. You came out on a morning like this in the rain and the snow and the sleet and the hail. Well, it's, every 6 months it rains in LA. So thank you for coming. I'm really impressed because the streets are kind of treacherous and the freeways are all closed and, the world's going a little nuts. So thank you for coming out. Shabbat Shalom. We wish everybody a good Shabbos. And welcome Rabbi Gelman back from his journeys.
I went to Florida.
Yeah.
They now give you a white belt and white shoes at the airport.
Yeah.
Because they don't want you wandering around and not looking like you fit in.
Yeah.
And I got a pair of pants that buckle up around my puppet.
Yeah, right.
I got that.
And you get a coupon to go to Denny's at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
I said, where's the Rascal House?
Have meatloaf. Oh, is this still there?
No, everything's gone.
Wolfie's is closed?
Collins Avenue has just Russian billionaires.
No.
That's all that's there.
Well, the Rascal House, that was there forever. That was Wolfie's, Did seriously? The Rascal House was the famous sort of Jewish deli in the neighborhood. That was fun, and it was.
And you'd put rolls in your purse.
Yeah. Oh my God, Baruch Diana Mess.
It's
All right.
It's an amazing town now.
Miami.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Miami.
Yeah. It's not just Miami. It's like everything from like
Whatever nation it's in.
Fort Lauderdale.
It's not America, but whatever it is,
You can speak Spanish or Yiddish, but you can't speak English, right? Or Russian, right? What?
English, Russian, every.
Really? Seriously?
But English.
But not English.
Not English.
All right, fair enough. Well, welcome back. We're glad you're here. Pop, good to see Pop. Glad you're here. Bob, welcome back from your job. Anyway, welcome to everybody. Couple of announcements. So it's a very quiet morning at VBS following, don't tell anybody, but following Torah study, there's just services. No bar mitzvah, no weddings, just daven until 11:30, go home. So if you'd like to come and pray with us, there's a nice little lunch afterwards. The Parsha group, is the Parsha group meeting today? Paul, who's leading it? You going to lead it? Who's leading it? Judy's in Israel already. Yeah, so a bunch of us are going to Israel. I'll be leaving on Monday night. We will have Torah study next week. Rabbi Farkas will be here to lead it. He's been practicing hard. I heard that Hoffman was good when he was here. I heard good reviews. So Farkas will be here for me next week, and I'll be back the following week. I'll be sleepy, but I'll be back. So please come back next week. It's a very quiet week in the shul because we're all away. So a lot of people are going to APAC on Saturday night. The big APAC policy conference is in Washington on Monday and Tuesday, or Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. Anybody going to APAC? So it's a nice experience. You can get it online now. You can watch it on C-SPAN or online. And the vice president is supposed to be coming, and if he's still in office by Monday. And Nikki Haley, who is what?
He could be president by then.
Yeah, or God only knows. Well, we think not, but then with him, you never know. I mean, he could come, he could send Mueller. We'll see what happens. So we don't know. We really don't know what's going to happen. On Friday night, there's a Rimonim, which is a beautiful musical service. Next Shabbos, of course, will be Torah study. I'll be back on Thursday, the 15th. So I'm going to wish everybody a really good. And Friday night, this following night, 16th, Cantor Barron is doing the next edition of his Farbrengen. He's done a series of these where he's done a night of Jewish folk music, but not Jewish folk music by Jews. So Paul Simon, Phil Oakes, Alan Sherman. Well, he's not doing Alan Sherman. This is more serious stuff. But Paul Simon, Phil Oakes, they're all Jewish. They're all the protest songs. Peter Yarrow, all the protest songs are written by Jews. So you're all welcome to come. That's the 16th. It's 2 weeks from yesterday, a week from this coming Friday night. Okay? Is that fair? Good. So this morning we're back in the book of Shemot, and which we haven't been in a while. And people come to Purim. Were you at Purim? We had a lovely time. I don't know if you were here, but the rabbis and I, we had such a good time. Like we forgot we were in shul and had just started goofing for each other, and we had a really nice time. So if you want to watch it, it's online now. I had an interesting moment. I'll just tell you about an interesting rabbi moment. You hear okay?
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat. Good. Good to see you. An interesting rabbi moment this week. So, one of the things that rabbis do is we counsel people, and I had a couple come to visit, a really lovely couple, who apparently I married 5 years ago. I don't remember, but they tell me I married them. They look familiar. And they're having a lot of trouble. Because they're both living very, very demanding lives. They have kids and careers and demands and family issues. And there's a lot of tension between the two of them. And they come into they sat down with me, and I said to them, have you gotten counseling? They said, we've done that before. We still don't seem to make any progress. So maybe you can help us. And I said, but I'm not a counselor. I'm not a good counselor because I tend to talk too much, Counselor's supposed to sit there for an hour going, I can't do that, But I started. I said to each one of them, tell me what happened, tell me what's happening. And each one of them tells me a story. And it's amazing how similar this story is. Basically, we love each other, we cared for each other, we went into this marriage, and things got a little more difficult. Children arrived, and career stuff, and family stuff. And I don't think I'm getting out of this marriage what I need to get out of the marriage. He or she makes nothing but demands on me all the time. I don't have the strength, the energy. And I'm listening to both of them talk, and at a certain point, I got really frustrated. This is why I'm not a marriage counselor. Because a marriage counselor would stretch them out for 3-4 sessions before getting to this point. And I stopped them about 30 minutes into the conversation. I said, all right, enough. I said, here's the problem. You think marriage is about what you can take. It's not, you get stuff out of marriage, it's no question, but it's also about what you give. And there doesn't seem to be any giving in this marriage. All you talk about is what you're not being able to take. And well, it's not me. See, I don't blame them for this because they're under a lot of stress. Everybody gets married, and when you're married, things are joyful. It's all flowers and candy, right? But the moment you start adding children, which means you're sleep deprived, and there's a financial stress, and so you're working harder to make the money to support the kids that now you don't have time to be with, and you add one stressor on top of the other, and what happens is you're needy. You become emotionally needy, and you go to the other partner, and you want from the other partner, and the other partner is just as emotionally needy, and you end up with this kind of a break. So at a certain point, I stopped, and I said, stop. Tell me what you give to each other. And there was this moment of like 30 seconds of silence. Like when you've just said the one thing that, and like, gee, no one's ever asked us that question, right? So I said, well, come on, let's talk that for a moment. And slowly they began to rethink. So I sent them home with an assignment. I want you to try to figure out what you owe to each other. And if you want to stay married to each other, but what you have to give to each other. And slowly they began to rethink this. That's what, the reason I tell you that isn't because I'm such a great man. I'm not. I'm a terrible marriage counselor. But in the Torah portion this morning, we're going to see the same thing. There's a moment of change of personality in the middle of this Torah portion, which is just remarkable. When you see it, you'll say, wow, look at the way the whole focus changes. So let's remember what this book is. The book is the second book of the Torah called Shemot, which literally means names, because it's a book about identity. The first half of the book is about our identity, about the identity of this people, right? We talk about the two principal events that shape the personality of this people, okay? The exodus from Egypt and the arrival at the covenant of Mount Sinai. Who are we as a Jewish people? We're a covenanted people that were slaves in Egypt. That's who we are. It turns out that the end of the book, the last several parshiot, the last several weeks that we read the book of Shemot, the book of Exodus, is about God's personality. And the question that you're going to see in the Torah portion, which is extraordinary, is this question, who are you, God? Who is this God? What does it mean to have this God in your life? What is the orientation of this God toward the world? And whatever that question means to you, it means something different to each of us, and you'll see the Torah acknowledges that. Because when you say this particular quality or set of qualities is divinity, is God, what you're doing is placing a claim on yourself. That means that has to be the highest aspiration of human ideals. What does it mean to say God is merciful? It means you have to become a forgiving person. What does it mean to say God is kind? It means kindness. You say what you're saying is that kindness is the core sort of theme of the world, and you have to plug yourself into it. It's actually a very powerful ethical statement as well as being a powerful metaphysical or theological statement. And that's what we're going to see negotiated in today's Torah portion. So open with me, it's Tissa, which is on page 523. And the story that, of course, we're going to read is the golden calf event, which you'll find on page 529. 529. Everybody here? Chapter 32 of the book of Exodus. Got a chumash? Everybody got a chumash? You'll need a chumash today because it's... Bob, you want a book? Is that okay? I'm good. Okay, please. You want to get a few more, David? All right, thank you, David. Okay, I'll read it, so if you don't have one, you can listen and you can follow, okay? So when the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain, okay, the people gathered against Aaron. The Hebrew is al Aharon, which means on top of him. So the translator uses the word against. You would imagine they'd gather in front of him, but no. They gathered, it's sort of, we use in English, we use the phrase ganged up on, right? That's sort of the phrase of it, right? And said to him, come make us a God who'll go before us. For that man Moses who brought us out of the land of Egypt, we don't know what's happened to him. Guy goes up a quaking mountain. He's 40 days gone. The mountain's quaking. He's 80 years old. He ain't coming back. And here we are stuck in the desert. We need something, a visible symbol. We need something visible to lead us, to be at the front of us. And there's an unclarity here about exactly what they're asking for. Are they asking for a God, a physical God? Are they asking for a representation of a God? It's not exactly clear, and you'll see that as the story goes on, which is exactly the question of what idolatry really is. We don't know what's happened to this guy, right? Aaron said to them, take off the gold rings that are in the ears of your wives, sons, and daughters, and bring them to me. Okay? Oh, thank you, Dave. Thanks. Here's a chumash for anybody who needs one. Okay? Thank you, David. All right, so this tells you two things. First of all, that Jewish boys wore earrings back then, too. So if your son or grandson or nephew wants to wear an earring, let him. And number two, the Midrash right away notices that Aaron says to the women of the community, give me your jewelry, and because he never thought they would do it, you know. Thank God they don't do it anymore now, okay? So, give me your jewelry. They give him all the jewels. The people took off the gold rings, brought them to him. He took them from them, cast it in a mold, and made a molten calf. Molten means it was you don't make a solid gold thing, that's too heavy. You make a frame like a piece of wood, and then you hammer gold leaf to it. That's what it is. Yeah, that's what it is. Because otherwise, you couldn't lift a golden calf, right? I mean, if you made this, unless it was tiny, but if it was big enough to see, it would weigh, 1,000 pounds, right? Okay? Now, listen to the two statements, because the two statements are critical. They exclaimed, who's they? The people. The people said, this is your God, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. And Aaron says, tomorrow shall be a festival to the Lord. Do you see the difference between the two statements? Right? Aaron says, this isn't God. This is simply a place where we can come and recognize God. This is a religious institution. And what's interesting about that statement, and this isn't God, but we can imagine, as it were, God resting above this. We know, by the way, from archaeology, that the symbol of a calf, right? The Babylonian emperor sat on a throne, and his footstool was a calf. That is, there was an icon of a calf with a little shelf on it, and he put his feet on it. This was well known in the ancient world. So the notion that what you're looking at a golden calf is not God, but God is above it and can't be seen. That's the idea. That's what Aaron was thinking. Okay? What are the people thinking? That's God. This object has some sort of power. This object is invested with some sort of magical electricity. some kind of magical power. And so what you have in the, Pop, 1 second. What you have here is a contrast between two ideas, okay? And this is a great sermon, which one of us will give one day soon, which is that the notion of idolatry is when you take the symbol and mistake the symbol for the thing it's supposed to symbolize. Like the symbol doesn't have any real power, but when you invest the symbol with all this sanctity, and it becomes so sacred, and you forget that it's supposed to symbolize something else, right? You fetishize the symbol is what is the language, right? And suddenly the symbol becomes more valuable to you than the thing it's supposed to point to. That's the technical definition of idolatry, right? I'll give you just one interesting political example of this, right? There was a great debate between Theodor Herzl, the founder of political Zionism, and Achad Ha'am, Asher Tzvi Ginsburg, who was an essayist who wrote under the name Achad Ha'am, who was a great cultural Zionist. Herzl said, the Jewish people need a country. We need a country to protect ourselves from the anti-Semitism of the world. Happened to be right. Achad Ha'am said, be careful. Because, you know, when people get countries, they worship the country. And they worship the country's power. And they worship generals who have stars on their shoulders and airplanes with insignias on their tails. And they forget what the country was founded to do. You fetishize the object instead of the thing it represents, the thing it stands for. You see? Now, symbols need to be respected, no question. But the question is, what is more sacred, the symbol or what it points to? And in this case, you have the notion where the symbol itself becomes the object of worship, right? Joseph Campbell, the mythologist, says it's like a hungry person walking into a restaurant and trying to eat the menu. You forget that it represents something. You see, it's supposed to point to something. And that's the definition, one of the definitions of idolatry. Pop.
You have the same thing here. When the Torah comes down the aisle, you have some people grabbing it and kissing it as if that had the power to do it.
Right.
And not just giving honor to it.
Right. So I told you this story last year, I think. They teach you in rabbi school you should never preach when you're angry because you'll say something hurtful. And this is a true thing. I got mad once because I was watching that. And I saw a little lady, an older woman of our congregation, knocked over by people who were reaching for the Torah. So when the Torah came back, I said to the congregation, I shouldn't have done this, but I did it. I'll confess. I said to them, how many of you just reached out to kiss the Torah? Everybody's hands go up. Good. Come in. Welcome. I said to the congregation, how many of you read Hebrew? Fewer hands went up. I said, how many of you understand what you're reading in Hebrew? We have this bizarre idea that if you can read phonetically, you read Hebrew. I can read French, but I don't understand a word except fromage. I mean, that's it. You know, ballet maybe, but that's it. How many of you understand the Hebrew you read? Fewer hands went up. I said, how many of you can read the Chumash, the Bible in Hebrew and understand what it says? Very few hands went up. And then I said what I shouldn't have said, which is, if you're reaching to kiss the Torah and you can't read it, you're committing an act of idolatry. What is it? What are you kissing? You're kissing a velvet cover, a parchment book, ink and paper? What is that? That's not holy. What's holy is what it says. What's holy is what it points to. The object itself is not holy, right? Now, I shouldn't have said that, because the object itself deserves reverence. It's true. But there is a certain strangeness to, right? The debate that we've had in America this last year. If you feel that America has betrayed a certain class of its citizens and you decide to kneel during the national anthem, have you committed an act of sacrilege? Well, the flag should be respected, it's true. But the flag is only a symbol of a greater ideal of liberty and justice for all. And if you don't believe that the country is living up to the ideals of liberty and justice for all, to respect the object and the song without respecting the ideal is an act of fetishized idolatry, right? Colin Kaepernick is not a very smart guy, by the way. He's a decent quarterback, but not. he's a very simple-minded guy. He said, we violated the ideals that the object stands for. How can you stand for the object? You see? I mean, and he got, castigated because there's patriots in the country who believe that but it's a very interesting question. I mean, he raised the question. By the way, when Irving Berlin wrote the song, the original song was not "You're a grand old flag." The original words were, "You're a grand old rag." He was making fun, or he was poking fun at people who idealized nationalism and patriotism at the expense of people in the country who were suffering. And then when the First World War started, he changed the words to "You're a grand old flag," because it became patriotic to be for the country in a war. But so this is the same idea. What does the symbol stand for? If you fetishize the object without observing the ideals of the, right? Observing the ideals that the object stands for, then you've committed a strange act. Please.
Yeah, but Rabbi, because we can't reach out and touch God.
Good question.
Don't we need these symbols?
Yes, and symbols should be, and there should be a degree of reverence for the symbol. But at what point does it become worship of the symbol and not worship of God, or worship of the ideal that it stands for? That's the great question, right? So here you have the Bible pointing this out, because the difference between Aaron's statement and the people's statement is very clear, right? Now, what's interesting here as well, we won't get into this in too much depth, is the place of this particular Torah portion, okay? If you look at the table of contents, which we won't do right now, this Torah portion is stuck in the middle of the narrative that tells about the building of the Mishkan, right? You have two Torah portions, Truma and Tissa, the last 2 weeks we've read, where God gives explicit and articulate instructions, meticulous instructions about how the Mishkan, the shrine, should be built. The shrine is a tent, and it has a big fence around it. And in the tent, there's a front room and a back room. And in the back, there's the Ark of the Covenant. That's the one that Harrison Ford found in a movie, right? And the Ark of the Covenant is a golden box. And on the golden box are two kruvim, angel statues. We talk about making golden statues to represent God, right? That's the Mishkan. Sorry? Yeah, the Oscar, right. Right. That's tomorrow night. Maybe they'll get it right this year and announce the winner instead of the second. Apparently they're doing it, the same two people, it's Faye Dunaway and Warren Beatty are doing it again. It's like, this time you'll get it right, idiot.
What difference going to give them the paper?
Yeah, no, or it's going to be printed in very big, print. Hey, idiot, the winner is. Right. But you see that. So this narrative is smack in the middle. You have Truma and Tissa, which tell God's instructions for the building of Mishkan. And then in the next 2 weeks, we're going to read Vayakel and Pekudei, which is the story of how Moses did it exactly as God says it. So you have 4 Torah portions which discuss the creation of the shrine. And smack in the middle is this narrative. Now, if you read it in the middle where it is, it's a very interesting commentary on religious institutions. It says exactly this: religions need symbols. People need symbols to capture and express their ideals, their religious visions. But don't mistake the symbol for the ideal. This becomes a commentary and a critique, a criticism, smack in the middle of that narrative, to remind you that the object is not God. The object points to something. That's exactly what this is for, right? Jerry.
And I think the wording suggests a much, even further, a deeper theological issue.
Yeah.
And that is, they're not using the same words. The people talk about Elohim.
Right, and God, and
Aaron talks about Adonai.
right, which means what? So,
which means that issue hasn't been resolved. I think the writer is saying that issue hasn't been resolved yet.
right,
This monotheism isn't something like a light switch. You turn it on, you have the revelation. given at Sinai,
Right.
that's it.
Right.
Everything else is erased.
Right.
So I think this is a live issue in the fact that it's in the middle of building the Mishkan says, yes, you're building something, but what for?
Right, exactly.
Right.
For whom, for, what for? Now, it's interesting, by the way, Rashi was the great medieval commentator. Following the rabbis, offers the idea that it's based on a Talmudic idea that ein muchar v'muktam b'Torah, that the Torah is not chronological. Rashi offers the idea that this narrative, the event of the golden calf, took place before God gave the commandment to build the Mishkan. So that what God learned through the experience of the golden calf is what you just said a moment ago: is people need tangible symbols. That's one way to read it. The fact that it's in the middle of the narrative, which means the Torah's editors put it there, is their idea that, but they'll say, don't mistake the symbol for the object. That's the danger of religious symbols. Now, let's see what happens. Everybody together? We all here? When Aaron saw this, he built an altar before it, said, tomorrow's the day of the Lord. Early the next day, the people offered up burnt offerings and brought sacrifices of well-being. They sat down to eat and drink and rose up to dance. Now, the rose up to dance is really interesting. If you look at the verse in Hebrew, and if anybody can read Hebrew with me, you should. Vayashkuma b'macharat v'ya'alu olot v'yigishu shlamim. They brought sacrifices, shlamim. Vayeshev ha'am le'echol v'shatu. They sat down to eat, which is what you do at a sacrifice. V'shatu, they drank. The next two words are so interesting. It's not enough that they ate and drank. All through the sacrificial worship, you eat and drink. You eat and drink sacrifices, right? It's the next two words which are really strange, right? Vayakumu litzachek. Litzachek. Litzachek is a really interesting word. It's one of these words that keeps popping up back in the narrative in strange places, right? First of all, it's the name of the second patriarch, Yitzchak, my namesake, right? Then it says Ishmael. Remember Ishmael, the brother? He was kicked out of the household. Why? Because he was mitzacheking with his brother. Right? Then Mrs. Potiphar. Remember Mrs. Potiphar? The seductive cougar lady who tried to get Joseph, right? Here's to you, Mrs. Potiphar. Right? Pharaoh loves you more than you will know. No, whoa, whoa. It says, what did she want to do to Joseph? Litzachek. Litzachek. So it says here, rise up to dance. It's more than dancing. It's what? Yeah, it's like that joke about mixed dancing, you know. It's a strange, it's something lascivious. It's something sexual. It's something out of control. There's a sort of physicality gone wild. It's a frat party. I mean, it's the Mardi Gras. There's something wrong here, right? Anyway, what happens? In the movies, the screen would now say, meanwhile, at the top of the mountain, right? The Lord spoke to Moses. Like on the top of the mountain, so on the bottom of the mountain, you have this wild frat party going on. And the top of the mountain, there's this pristine silence of moral clarity. And in the pristine silence of moral clarity, the Lord spoke to Moses, hurry down, for your people who you brought out of Egypt have acted basely. Every parent who's ever taken children on a car ride and turned to your partner and said, your kids are fighting in the back seat, right? They've quickly turned aside from the way I enjoin them. They've made themselves a molten calf, bowed down to it, and said, this is your God. So that's the first thing he says. Now listen to what God says. The Lord further said to Moses, I see this as a stiff-necked people. What do you mean stiff-necked? I mean, what do they mean? Stubborn in what way? Say that again, Ben. They don't change. I'm trying to grow them. I'm trying to raise them. I'm trying to shape them. They won't be shaped. This people won't be shaped. What the hell is wrong with you people? Look at how much look at God saying, look how much I've invested in this people, right? I did this whole light show in Egypt, 10 plagues, right? I brought them out of Egypt. We crossed the Red Sea, for God's sakes, right? I give them manna to eat in the desert. I bring them to Mount Sinai. The mountain quakes. I speak to them face to face. You'd imagine that somewhere along the way they've changed, right? Somewhere along the way. But as soon as you turn your back, bam, they're back to being the same schleppers they were before. Like, this is like every parent of a teenager who says, like, what's it going to take? Yeah, I gave you the car. I gave you the car keys. What's it going to take? This is the frustrated parent. You hear the frustrated parent? This is a stiff-necked people. Now, the next phrase is, let me be that my anger may blaze forth against them, and I'll destroy them, and I'll make of you a great people. What does God want to do? Start over. Say again? Start over. Have you ever seen this pattern before in the Bible? Yes. Where did you see it? Noah. It's the Noah story all over again, right? I screwed up. This people ain't going to do it. I'll kill them all, and I'll start with you. You, Moses. You'll have a few kids. They'll have a few kids. I'll have a few kids. Inside of 1,000 years, there'll be a people there. I'm not in a hurry, right? Right? Start over again. I burnt the cake. I throw it out, and I make another one. Anyone ever do that when you're cooking? Right? Now, but look at the phrase. The phrase is so interesting. The phrase in Hebrew is hanichali, which means back off and let me do this, or let me do it. It's a more formal thing. It's like, if it please. You know how a lawyer will say, if it please the court, before the lawyer approaches the bench, right? Moses takes the hanichali, let me be, or the if it please the court. He takes that seriously. And Moses implored the Lord, let not your anger, O Lord, blaze forth against your people. Don't do it. Don't do it, right? Whom you delivered out of the land of Egypt, right? With great power. Let not the Egyptians say it was an evil intent that he delivered them to kill them off in the mountains and annihilate them from the face of the earth. So the first reason you shouldn't do this is why? What will the goyim say, right? Right? You're airing our dirty laundry in public. You really want the front page of the New York Times to say, right? Right? Mueller charges Lord with manslaughter. I mean, is that really what you want the front page of the New York Times to say? Right? Turn from your anger, your blazing anger, renounce the plan to punish your people. And now he gives second claim. Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. Right? Second argument is you have a covenant with their ancestors, and you love their ancestors. They still have that in them. Don't give up on these people. How you swore to yourself and said to them, I'll make your offspring numerous. And God says, all right, fine. I'll calm down, right? Thereupon Moses turned and he goes down the mountain, right? Now here's what happens. He comes down the mountain, and as he gets close, you all know the story. He smashes the tablets. We could spend some time on that. He confronts his brother, says to his brother, what'd they do to you that this happened to you? And his brother tells him a story, right? If you turn to page 534, it's one of the funniest scenes. Sad, but funny. Moses says to Aaron, what did this people do to you? Aaron says, don't be angry. You know them. You know this people is bent on evil. You know they're bent on evil, right? You know their character. They said, make us a god to lead us. For that man Moses has brought us out. We don't know what happened. So I said, whoever has gold, take it off. They gave it to me. I hurled it into the fire, and poof, out came this calf. I love that. Moses sees so out of control they were. And by the way, the Hebrew is interesting. Vayar Moshe et ha'am ki parua hu. Parua means out of control. But it's the same letters as the word Pharaoh. It's the same letter as the word Pharaoh, right? So, you know what? There's something bad in this people. There's something evil. One second. So what happens is he punishes the people. The people, he yells at the people, right? And God says to them, right? Right? Page 536. Verse 31. Moses went back to the Lord and said, this people is guilty of a great sin in making a god of gold.